Australian hip-hop and musical fans were treated with a little announcement recently.
Hamilton, Sydney, Australia, 2021. Thank you to everyone in Australia who's been asking for Hamilton. It's on its way. We can't wait.
I'm willing to wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it.
Now, firstly, considering that Melbourne usually gets musicals a year or two before Sydney does, golf claps for Gladys Berejiklian, finally getting something right.
People criticise you every day.
Now, Hamilton coming to Australia raises several discussion points, but if you would like to skip my long rant and just jump to my hot picks of Australian cast members, then click down on this timeline. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Time signature? Time! Anyway, so I thought because Hamilton is such a hip-hop heavily influenced show, I've done a fair few musicals around Sydney myself, and being a long-time Australian hip-hop aficionado, which for some reason is not considered a high art form.
Collars up, that's how it goes, Southern Cross with a CD mo.
Anyway, that I would be able to provide some unique insight into Hamilton coming to Australia, considering that out of the Venn diagram of hip-hop and Sydney musicals, I would fall neatly in that little vulva of crossover. That was... Can't go 2 minutes, can you?
You are so awesome.
Okay, world, where the fame be at? I checked up on my YouTube to fidget with the click widget.
Now, the first topic of discussion that I'd like to delve into,
Number one,
is how in recent years Australia has had an issue of a lot of international performers coming in and being given these roles in large-scale productions once Australia finally puts them on. When they've already had these opportunities back home in America on Broadway or in Britain at the West End. So it stifles the opportunities of all our great local Australian talent in ever actually getting an opportunity to perform in such shows, especially when you consider that America and Britain have much tighter regulations on casting international performers. So it's very much a lose-lose situation for Australian performers, because these international performers keep taking our jobs.
They took our jobs!
they took your job! They took your job! They took your job!
Now, in Australia, a lot of actors would be part of the union MEAA, and then there's also a separate union for the production companies called Live Performance Australia. And in recent decades, they had a reasonable agreement between the two regarding the restriction of foreign overseas international performers being cast in roles when a show is finally put on in Australia. But since 2012, that agreement has not been carried forward. So the regulations, policies, guidelines nowadays are much more vague for Disney and other Broadway productions when they come to Australia to even have to hold a local audition process. Only if a role has been deemed not to have been suitably filled will an Australian get the opportunity. And they can deem that an international performer will provide more prestige to the show, thus draw bigger crowds in, and justify that by saying, well, it will provide the local economy with more jobs in the box office and the ushers and merchandisers and things like that. So it's very hard for, an Australian local performer to ever get the opportunity to prove, well, I would have brought in just as much prestige and drawn as big a crowd as this international performer who's already had this opportunity overseas, and we never get that opportunity because you've got such, strict regulations overseas on international performers. You'll see examples of this like in Australia's Aladdin recently. The Genie and Jasmine were American. The current Willy Wonka in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory show is American. Half the cast of Book of Mormon were Canadians and Americans. So you'll very much find that, local Australian talent just never get an opportunity to work. And when you compare, the performing arts in Australia with, say, rugby players who, on average, the average professional rugby player earns $372,000 a year. And now compare that with, the elite of Australia's performing arts industry you'd be lucky to crack 100K if you got a solid 12 months work in the opera house. So that's kind of ludicrous when we consider that Australian talent, when it comes to acting in Hollywood, singing in the Billboard charts and pop music, when demonstrably, we're nailing, Five Sauce, Sia, Iggy Azalea, Troye Sivan, they're regularly getting on the Billboard charts. We have Chris Hemsworth and Cate Blanchett in the superhero movies. Heath Ledger was the Joker. Harley Quinn is Margot Robbie. The Australian actors are getting cast in films by Martin Scorsese, by Quentin Tarantino, by Peter Jackson, by James Cameron. Avatar was the highest grossing film till recently. The sequel will be the next one. Again, Australian performers. We have Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. We have Rebel Wilson in Cats and Pitch Perfect. Why then, when it comes to a show being put on in Australia, can we not fill it with Australian talent? So to quickly summarise, Australia's performing arts industry is a bit of a dead end of opportunity for our local talent, especially when you consider someone like Hugh Jackman can go over to America. He's cast as a lead in the Les Mis movie, in The Greatest Showman. He hosts the Tony Awards 4 times. The Tony Award, the awards for the Broadway industry, hosts that 4 times. But when a Broadway show comes to Australia, oh no, we can't be trusted with providing enough talent to put on a good show. No, you need to bring in all your international performers to fill those roles. Number 2. When a production is put on in Australia, they tend to pluck talent from the general pool of Australian. So you'll find in something like 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, they had Lisa McCune and Magda Szubanski from TV. There have been a lot of play school hosts who have performed in musicals. Australian Idol winners and runners-up in shows like Wicked, along with Bert Newton for some reason. Paulini was recently cast in Saturday Night Fever with Marsha Hines, who will also be the dragon in Shrek. They have Casey Donovan and Natalie Bassingthwaite, I believe, in Chicago. We had Tim Minchin in Jesus Christ Superstar before he created Matilda. So I've taken this into consideration, and especially when the American audition forms specify that no experience is necessary in stage performance or Broadway shows. So I've taken all these elements into consideration when going for my picks of local Australian talent who I think would really suit the roles well. My hot picks, if you will. Keep the hands down. Yep, just number 3. So for the uninitiated, rap hip hop fans who may not be familiar with the show, Lin-Manuel Miranda, you might be more familiar with having done the vast majority of songs for the Moana film. And he was also in the recent Mary Poppins remake.
Your mama thinks you're just a waste of space.
I first saw him in a college humour sketch about a decade ago, if you recognise this face.
And when it comes to intimacy, there's plenty of fish in the sea, but listen to me. I know about your little deficiency. Streeter told me about your undescended testicle. The incident at the Renaissance Festival. The time that gorgeous woman almost slept with you and fell the back because your nutsack is asymmetrical.
He did a show called In the Heights in 2008, which was very Latino infused music and a bit of rapping in that.
Behind the stage lights, we're taking a flight to a couple of days in the life for what it's like in Washington Heights,
which got him some attention getting in the Broadway scene that year.
Bring it on, the musical.
Consider it, it's a little different, isn't it? You're thinking it's limited, give it a minute, envision it. Dead in the middle of 70 women on television, every little bit of precision is magnificent.
He then came back in 2015 with this colossal effort of about 20,000 plus words of biographical, lyrical, historical, musical.
History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. The greatest city in the world.
The underlying byline of Hamilton is the story of America then by America now. So whilst the vast majority of the historical figures as the characters in the show are traditionally white, the casting specifications of this show require people of color or of ethnic ambiguity to apply for these roles. Now, this is not an entirely new concept. The Wiz, of course, in the 1970s had an all-black cast reimagining The Wizard of Oz. However, it hasn't been without its controversies.
That's racist!
Me personally, I feel it's kind of a step backwards from what something like Moana brings, where if you want to progress diversity and representation, going for a culturally authentic story and representing those faces and narratives, based on their own merits, create something that's quite different to the current zeitgeist we have of traditionally Anglo-white stories, faces, characters, and narratives being recast with minority performers. As that, for me, kind of sends the message that we don't value, the cultural faces and stories and narratives on their own merits, and they need to ride the coattails of the popular white culture in order to get representation. That's just my personal opinion. But I've, of course, taken this into consideration again in my top... Why do I do this with my fingers? Top picks. Top picks. 5! We do have quite dissimilar minority groups within our countries. So America's demography looks something like this, and you will often see this represented in their theatrical plays and their texts and their musicals, as this is where the majority are written and often set, so often in Chicago and New York, and you'll find a lot of Black and Hispanic characters and influence in these shows when they're not predominantly whitewashed. Now, when casting for roles in Australia, we have quite a different demography, twice the Southeast Asian population, 6 times the Indian Central population, and of course our Indigenous populations are quite different. So when Australian community theatre or high school groups put on a Broadway show, you'll often find that the Black and Hispanic and Native American characters tend to get played by, Central Asians and Southeast Asians and Pacific Islanders, and everyone just kind of goes along with it. So this will be fine with the show Hamilton and their casting requirements. As there is, of course, and historically over the past century and even in recent decades, the issue of minority representation in theatre, stage and musicals not keeping up with the rate of multicultural growth within these nations. So that's the positive that a lot of people take from this show. It is quite problematic in the way that it champions the founding of a nation, which was, of course, a very white founding of a nation that was traditionally owned by the Native Americans, and they don't feature at all in the show. It was, of course, founded on chattel slavery, and, why isn't the show about black people, starring black people? It's instead, a lot of white founding fathers being played by black people.
Down on their luck, you see, that was my wife who you decided to...
I got the horses in the bag.
Anyway, babbled on long enough. Let's hop to those topics. Now, it is quite difficult to source video examples of people's live performance experience, as you're technically not supposed to film Broadway musicals and such on stage. But these are the clips I've managed to scramble together for a lot of these roles and a lot of the castings that I think are hot picks for... Fucking stop doing that. Oh my God. Have a look. So I've got some excerpts from the Hamilton live show. I've then synced in the audio from the soundtrack, which was very time consuming. And then I've provided a comparison between the characters, the kinds of songs that they perform in the show, and some examples from these performers' oeuvre.
What's your name, man?
Alexander Hamilton.
So I shall kick it off with the role of King George III, who is, of course, symbolic of the British nationhood that these American founding fathers are trying to break free from to start a new nation afresh. So first of all, this performer needs to have a very good falsetto / high voice.
You say our love is draining.
raining and you can't go on. And oh, I was a king under your control.
And I have, of course, picked Brendan McLean,
Ewing Klipspringer, dubious descendant of Beethoven,
who I think would really suit this role well, not just vocally, but he would also bring the physicality of this character, who's very camp and effete, if that's the word I'm looking for. And he exudes this kind of snide, snobbish, fobbish character that's very demeaning and patronizing towards the Americans, and provides a lot of comedic relief throughout the show.
Jesus Christ, this will be fun. Da 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 da. Will you show me your way? Way. You're giving me attitude. It's making me follow you.
Next up, we have a bunch of male roles that are dual roles. So in Act 1, they are one character, and in Act 2, they become another character. So first up, we have the Marquis de Lafayette, who is French. He delivers a lot of the most fast-paced rapping, not only in this show, but in pretty much any musical ever. So he really needs to be on top of that vocally. So I thought El Fresh the Lion.
I'm taking this horse by the reins, making red coats weather with blood stains. And I'm never gonna stop until I make them drop, burn them up and scatter the remains down.
Tell it how it is, it's a pain to be in it, trying to stay sane, play in the game that they give us time to ask what we want, but they never really listen. We would never feel changed, so we change the system.
I'm in the cabinet, I am complicit in watching him grabbing at power and kissing it. Washington isn't gonna listen to discipline dissidents. This is the difference, this kid is out.
My people are savage, with a level of devotion that you couldn't even imagine. My rap smoke them out of the jungle and leave them in ashes. These cats think they flow is hot, but they seemingly blasted. Everything I touch, I turn to gold. Been racking up these accolades since I was 12 years old. It ain't even challenging, I do this naturally. So pay close attention, yo, I call this alchemy.
Who not only would suit the vocal delivery of that character very well, but again later as Thomas Jefferson in Act 2, is another character who brings a bit of comedic relief, a bit of quirk and character. So have a look at a comparison between the two here.
France is following us to revolution. There is no more status quo.
Now this is a story of about how my life got flipped, turned upside down. And I like to take a minute, just sit right there. I tell you how I came to be on this mic right here.
Next up we have Hercules Mulligan, who is very much a kind of brash, brutish. He's full of braggadocio and bravado. So I thought, Briggs. That came across so much cooler in my head than when I delivered. That happens a lot. For those who are not familiar, Briggs is a prominent Indigenous rapper. He's also acted on the TV show Clever Man and does some segments on the Weekly Show.
Here are 5 times this year that Australia was definitely not racist.
So he would very much bring that kind of gruff gravel to the vocal delivery, as well as being quite physically formidable as well. So have a look at a comparison between the two.
I am Hercules Mulligan, up in it, loving it. Yes, I heard your mother said, come again. Lock up your daughters and horses. Of course, it's hard to have intercourse over 4 sets of corsets.
Blow it up, throw it up. Have our name on the frame so they know it's us. I tell them where I'm at naked, follow me. Remember that their kids know they campaign policy. I select the individual, separate from the family. Visits and interviews, maximum punishment. Rehab is minimal. Treat them like that, you just make them better criminals.
I'm joining a rebellion, cause I know it's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, I'm gon' take shit.
Sometimes what you get is like a kick to the head. I guess you can chalk it up to cause and effect, but the core is all rotten and they gotta be fed.
As the character James Madison, he has a bit more of a cool, collected, calm reserve, but still bringing that imposing physicality to the stage.
The pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain, the testament to his pain.
Caught up, soda, smoked you for water, taught us from my daughter, brought up borders, passed the reporters, cause we give them 4 quarters for standing in the corner with anxiety disorders.
We now now move on to a much more physically less imposing character, which is Jean Laurens, who's like a kind of a bright-eyed, optimistic sidekick to Hamilton in the first act. And in Act 2, he then becomes Philip Hamilton, who's Hamilton's son. So he has a bit of cocky swagger and hubris. Oh, spoilers. And I think someone who would really suit this role is Justice, who was the first Australian to win Scribble Jam in America.
So good day, mate. You need a vacate, because based on your time zone, you're a day late.
Since then, he's had an ARIA nomination. He released a mixtape called Fresh Off the Boat. He still looks 19, so I think he would suit the role really well. Have a look.
The challenge demands satisfaction. If they apologize, no need for further action. Number 2. If they don't, grab a friend, that's your second.
Take a trip to Mars, total recall of a distant past. Freed from the shackles of this thick facade of business cards, glamour, glitz and cars, and lit cigars.
I will never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. You and I do or die. Wait till I sally in on a stallion with the first black battalion.
And I don't mean the vibe that you get with Vanilla Ice. Now you wanna touch me, you wanna slice, and you can tell your friends that they may have been ill-advised, cause you wanna trust me, it's in your eyes.
My name is Philip, I am a poet, and I'm a little nervous but I can't show it. I'm sorry, I'm a Hamilton with pride. You talk about my father, I cannot let it slide.
I'm feeling no remorse, I'm down for the confrontation, no doubt. And it's occupation, there's thousands I hope you fall. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it. No other directive. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it.
Now on to our 3 leading ladies.
Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, the Schuyler sisters. Angelica, Peggy, Eliza.
First up is Angelica, who is an absolute powerhouse of a role. There were 3 main criteria I had in mind when choosing who would suit this really well. First of all, she has a very strong, outgoing attitude, very in your face, very brazen. Not a shrinking violet / wallflower, whatever that analogy is. So she needs that sass and attitude. She also has a lot of very fast pitter-patter rapping throughout the show. And she also needs to carry a decent mezzo. So those were the 3 elements I took into consideration. Little controversial in my choice. She's a bit of a baby, but she absolutely has the receipts of a hip-hop performer in Australia. And that is, of course, TK Meisner.
I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. So men say that I'm intense or I'm insane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation.
I like the Himalayas, I'll keep it and ain't been nothing. Trying to get on this scale, but the tripping, slipping and puffing. Killing the mic, we're killing Mike, busy and moving. The circle is smaller, but focus made me a nuisance. They say they're coming for you, but I don't want none. Cause I really don't care, and I'm still kinda young.
I remember that night, I just might regret that night for the rest of my days. I remember those soldier boys tripping over themselves to win our praise.
Give us what you got, cause we have everything you want, and we are ready for it, reaching for the top. And I said, hey, hey, living on the run, pulling at the strings till the lights turn on, it's too late. Living on the run, but we're staring at the wall.
Conversation lasted 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Everything we said in total agreement.
Double up, double and down to the biz, and always corrupt that balance, and always corrupt my team exist.
So TK has toured with Charlie XCX. She was pulled on stage by the Hilltop Hoods. She's done a hook for Troye Sivan, and she's had a lot of success in France, like tens of millions of views. So she can perform live, she can rap fast, she brings that sassy attitude.
And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Work!
Next year I'ma work, take time then a merc, no eye for a jerk.
And she carries a decent tune, so that's my pick for Angelica.
But when I fantasize at night, it's Alexander's eyes as I romanticize.
You're just a white rose when the sun is out. Mind open, mind open.
She'll be happy as his bride.
Watch us glow in screaming color. We break them all, we're bright and bold.
Now onto Eliza. So this was very much a kind of a no-brainer in deciding on a person of colour who would really suit the vulnerability of Eliza Hamilton, who is the wife character, whilst also still having a very strong vocal delivery for some of her more powerful songs later on.
I have never been the type to try and grab the spotlight. We were at a revel with some rebels on a hot night. Bang, bang, heat it up, fill my cup, I'm filling up. Double denim, zip it up, oh.
So I think Jessica Mauboy would really own every song that Eliza Hamilton manages.
Okay, bring the girls, time for pussycats to purr. You just have to wait your turn, oh.
She has acted and sung in Brand New Day and the Sapphires. She's done Eurovision. She performs live all the time. I think she would totally kill this role.
When you broke her heart, you have torn it all apart. I'm watching it burn. 'Cause I don't wanna want you like I do.
Now on to Peggy. And again, it's another dual role. So in Act 1, it's the younger sister, and in Act 2, she becomes Mariah Reynolds, who is more of the seductress character for Hamilton. I had someone in mind for this, so I started this video like 6 or 7 weeks ago, and then I moved house, and I worked 2 jobs, and I got sick, and...
Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Rehearsing a musical of May I Earn, where's Les Mis in there somewhere. So by the time I got around to visiting this performer's YouTube channel to get some examples and video clips to make this video, I noticed that yesterday they added a playlist of Hamilton songs. So I'm assuming, as they already have a lot of professional credits within Australia, that they've probably got an agent who's already got them in for the Hamilton auditions in Australia, which were just announced recently. So instead, I'm going to go with more of a fresh face. So this individual also has a few musical performance credits to their name. They've also performed in Family Law, the comedy series from television, if you're familiar with that, and was apparently also in Puffs recently. So my radar's buzzing as a young up-and-comer here.
Cleo. Sorry, Emma. Cleo.
It is Kimi Tsukakoshi.
I know you are a man of honor. I'm so sorry to bother you at home, but I don't know where to go.
Fly as high as you can see. Spread your wings and you'll be free.
Daddy said to be home by sundown. Daddy doesn't need to know. Daddy said not to go downtown.
Ready to stand and ready to know what the people know. Ask him my questions and get some answers.
Stay.
Hey.
Hey.
Yours. Half of all of this is yours.
Next up, of course, we have George Washington, who is the general. So the George Washington character is kind of a father figure for Hamilton, who was an orphan. So he's the mentor figure. He provides that wisdom. So whilst being a very powerful man, he's still quite very humble and stoic. He's got big dick energy, I think is what I'm trying to say here. George Washington has big dick energy.
Look, we are outgunned, outmanned.
They call me wonderful, so I am wonderful.
I thought a local Antipodean performer who has been Mufasa in The Lion King, when I saw that 15 years ago. He's been Shrek. In New Zealand, he played in Wicked. So he's got that stage experience. I've seen him in Peter Pan Goes Wrong as well. So, you know, he can act, he can sing. I'm gonna nail this pronunciation now. Laga'aia.
One last time, the people will hear from me. One last time, you should see one monkey in the tree. One monkey in a tree. Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control.
Did you know this junkyard slave isn't even old enough to shave?
Okay, we're on to our big guns now. Aaron Burr is not only the narrator of throughout the show, he's also kind of the antithesis of Hamilton's character, his antagonist. He's not so much a villain, because he's still a very likable character and has a lot of good characteristics. It's just that very much the modus operandi of Aaron Burr versus Alexander Hamilton, they're very much chalk and cheese, ice and fire. The Martin Luther King to his Malcolm X. I think that's a good analogy. My American history isn't the best.
Pardon me, are you Aaron Burr, sir?
That depends. Who's asking?
Oh, well, sure. Sir, I'm Alexander Hamilton.
He not only carries a hip-hop flow throughout the show, but he also needs to be able to belt out some really amazing, powerful vocals. And I think locally, in Australia, someone who suits that to a T has to be Guy Sebastian.
We'll give the world to you and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday.
The pain, I know it well, but it hasn't kept me down. You think you got me figured out?
If you've got something to say, name a time and place, face to face. I have the honor to be your obedient servant, A. Burr.
All the moments in my life, the ones I got to share with you were probably my favorite. I know you're looking down on us. I'm missing you, bro. I hope you're proud of us. At least I know you made it home. And I know you're not alone. Cause now you're singing with a choir.
Look him in the eye, aim no higher. Summon all the courage you require, then count.
But I'm not keeping score. I'm not keeping score.
I'm willing to wait for it. I'm willing to wait for it. Life doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. It takes and it takes and it takes, and we give it anyway. We rise and we fall and we fall.
And I'm at the point of breaking, and it's impossible to shake it.
If those final notes from, you know, a live performance didn't win you over, that it would be well worth paying for a ticket to see this show with Guy Sebastian in that role, I don't know what's going to win you over.
I don't know how to say no to this.
We of course have the titular role of Alexander Hamilton. So there is a whole lot of meticulous rhyming that this performer needs to bring to the stage.
She courted me, escorted me to bed, and when she had me in a corner, that's when Reynolds extorted me for a sordid fee. I paid him quarterly. I may have mortally wounded my prospects, but my papers are orderly. As you can see, I kept a record of every check in my checkered history. Check it again against your list and see consistency.
As well as some tenor singing in a lot of the songs.
And when my prayers to God were met with indifference, I picked up a pen, I wrote my own deliverance.
So whilst I was championing Omar Musa, who is a local Australian slam poet.
This is for the dreamers, model minority achievers. Think you got it safe if approved for a visa. Eager to please, but you put your foot wrong and they go into a seizure. Take you to the cleaners, then they talk about the hand that feeds you. Remember, it's also the hand that beats you. Or tell you go home even though it's your birthplace. It means that they didn't think you Aussie in the first place. Stand with them, band land with them we transition, and notes handwritten to a future beyond. The ambition, plant seeds, a grand vision of righting the wrongs we found fire. Tell me what you see.
And he's very much always conveyed similar messages and themes of the immigrant experience within a white society that tells you you don't belong and that you have to forge your way forward through the face of this adversity. I don't think he would manage the singing of this. So my next choice was Adrian Eagle, who has this beautiful, unique voice.
I wanna be the best man I can be. Surround myself with any good energy. I look to Jah for strength and guidance on the way. Our journey is eternal, learning every day. Oh, oh, A-okay. And I'ma hit him with A-okay.
Apparently he was 270 kilos as a teenager and shed a lot of that weight down, and now just has a lot, fresher, vibrant, outgoing, optimistic attitude. Beautiful individual. Have a listen to some of his work.
And I lost my identity, and I came from housing trust to be living in castles, houses of serenity. Ooh, we walked them hard roads, came same, yeah. Hoods is hilltop, young mixed race baby of the 80s and me 90s. Somebody remind me, ooh, ooh, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Only thing I wanna break is these ceilings in my way. Can't learn to fly in just a day. My self-love could have been better, but my ambitions would not fray. And everybody's on my level, and I guess that I'ma take them higher to the temple. Everybody's elevating everybody. Only good energy, negativity, and nobody. See, I've been the melody of rhythm since a youngin', and now the blind life is plentiful. I'm loving it, and I'm up to my ego chain.
I still didn't think he quite had the essence of Alexander Hamilton. So my final hot pick is what is that? We are out of time. Oh no, I don't have time to provide my final pick for the role of Hamilton. Why don't you? I want you to comment and provide your opinion of the decision. Be good and right. Your suggestions of and right below. Comments, write your hot picks and your choices. You do the hot picks for respond, and we can communally create a dialogue. Like your opinion. I want your opinion. Your opinion matters to me. Yeah.